Correspondent Jim Shuter obtained those documents. He is joining me now from Washington, and correspondent Jumana Karachi is with us from Amman. She has recently returned from a deployment in Qatar. Jim, these documents were secret before you obtained them. Now both sides have been publicly reacting and commenting on CNN's reporting. Why are these documents so key to understanding the roots of this crisis, and what does the timing of their release mean?
Well, it gives you such a remarkable view inside these extremely important high-level relationships going back to 2013. After all, a handwritten agreement signed by the royals of these countries, of Saudi Arabia, of Qatar and Kuwait, and then in 2014 adding Bahrain, the UAE, and Abu Dhabi. At the most senior levels, you see that for a number of years now, there have been deep, deep disagreements about who is responsible for what. And in fact, not too thinly veiled accusations, many of them directed at Qatar, for continuing to support opposition groups, deviant groups, as they're described in here, including, it appears, terrorist groups, opposition groups within the countries in the Gulf region, other groups outside the region in Egypt, Yemen, and elsewhere. It shows you that this has been an issue for some time, and that great effort was made at the highest levels, in private, in secret, to try to make progress on these issues. And yet now, 3 and 4 years later, they are coming out in public, as we've seen with the blockade, and now with the release of these agreements, and in effect giving fuel to both sides, right? As you say, Becky, both sides pointing to the other to say that you did not fulfill your agreements, your commitments here, and neither did you. And I think, listen, let's be honest, these agreements coming to the fore in public light because some sides in this division want to make a point, right, about where they think the mistakes were made and who is responsible. Really remarkable to see these laid out in such stark form and so public from what were really the most private senior meetings, senior-level meetings that really could be possible there.
Jim, Washington's top diplomat, Rex Tillerson, says that he is in region to help de-escalate this crisis. But his comments about Qatar's position being reasonable, somewhat of a surprise, certainly to, I would expect, the other side of this, and in stark contrast, it seems at least, to messaging from the White House. Your thoughts?
Yeah. It's a remarkable... Tillerson has two mountains to climb here, right, in effect. I mean, he's got the mountain of trying to bring these divided parties closer together, at least finding a path to bring them closer together, really just to avoid escalation. But he has this other mountain in that his commander-in-chief, some weeks ago, basically, via Twitter, as is his way, put himself on one side of this division. President Trump tweeting, accusing Qatar of supporting terrorism, etc., after his visit to Saudi Arabia. Now you have the Secretary of State coming and saying, listen, the U.S. is going to be a mediator here. He's not saying explicitly ignore what the president said, but to sit down there next to the Emir of Qatar and call their positions reasonable, you can't have a more diametrically opposed position to what your commander-in-chief said just a number of weeks ago. And this, as you know, Becky, and we've talked about this on a number of things, is a frequent dynamic here where the president will go one way and his senior staff will go another. The question is, where is the real power center in the policy? And that must be very difficult for the Gulf nations to deal with, because they will say, I imagine, well, the president was just here and he said X, and now you're here and you're saying Y. You know, how do we circle that square, as it were?
Jumana, you were in Doha recently for an extended period reporting on this crisis. Rex Tillerson told Qatar that he's around these parts as everyone's friend. Have a listen.
Yes, I'm here as a friend to the region. I'm here
as a friend to the region, he said. He may be the only friendly face around them at this point. There is really no love lost here in region at present. What has changed in what was this once close GCC club?
Well, I think it's very interesting, Becky, to see, the changes. If you look at these documents that Jim has been reporting on, it's interesting to see what Qatar seemed to agree to in 2013, 2014. Perhaps an indication of these issues reemerging every time we see some sort of change in power or change in succession lines in this region. Back in 2013, 2014, when these agreements were signed, this is when you saw that transition of power taking place in Qatar, when Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani, the father of the current emir, handed over power to his son. And Sheikh Hamad was seen as the man. He was credited for transforming Qatar. He was seen as, Qatar under his rule emerged as a very influential regional and international player. And it's that time when Qatar really emerged as a source of irritation for its bigger and stronger neighbors like Saudi Arabia and the UAE. And it was also at that time when those agreements were signed, Becky, as you know, it was King Abdullah of Saudi Arabia, the last agreement signed just weeks before his death. So now we're seeing these issues re-emerge. As Jim pointed out, this is not something new. This has been going on for some time. And this is at a time we're seeing this change in Saudi Arabia right now with the new crown prince coming into power. Some see him as having a more confrontational foreign policy. So you do have people in the region today, for example, some Qataris who are wondering if these countries had these issues with Qatar, if they believed that Qatar was not complying with what it agreed to back in 2013-14. Why is this only coming out 3 years later? Why is it coming out as they're seeing this change in Saudi Arabia and a new U.S. administration, Becky?
Jumana Karachi, today reporting for you out of Amman, and Jim out of Washington. Thank you so much, both of you. Well, from a war of words here to a real war.